All right. 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. Let's do it. All right. So announcements. Several announcements. The first, this is the 4th chapter of Computing Essentials, which means that the first exam covering chapters 1 through 4 is open. As I said before, 50 questions, multiple choice. They're all multiple choice. No true or false, no weirdness there. It's just multiple choice. And you have unlimited time. Does that mean I can leave it and come back later? Yes. If anybody's watching me from another class, ask your teachers to do it too, okay? All right. I know they're gonna get so mad at me for saying stuff live like that. But anyhow, no real other announcements. Today is gonna go pretty quick. I'm just gonna warn you that I have 2 really cheesy videos that I'm gonna show, so like no judgment. I'm gonna talk during one of them. Yes, you're gonna get some history of operating systems today. So yes, there has, I've got to do it's history at some point, right? I mean, I talked about the internet and the web and how all that went about. So today we're going to go over operating systems primarily for most of today's class. Cool. Oh, that's right. Okay, that's better. That's what I wanted to do. All right, so here we go. So in chapter 3, talked about application software, and that's software that we all use, of course. But today we're going to talk about system software, which the device uses, your computer uses. So we talked about all those different computer types. All of them have something called an operating system. We'll go through that. So computers, you're going to hear the word ubiquitous more than one time in this course. So computers are ubiquitous in our lives, and we expect them to be there when we need them. However, we don't really give much thought to the processes and programs that are running behind the scenes. Usually we only care about those things when what happens to your device breaks. There you go. It stops working. Yes, exactly. So you turn it on and you're like, well, how come it's not going to the desktop? Then you start wondering about these things. Or when everything starts slowing down for some people, they're like, why is everything so slow? Well, and you got to start thinking about these things now, because you're going to have to either close applications, you're going to have to stop the startup programs, which I'll talk about that in a few minutes with Task Manager. But just keep in mind that operating systems, utility programs, and device drivers are the 3 primary types of system software that I'm going to talk about in this chapter. Oh, ho-hum. Okay. All right. So, as I said before, system software handles the technical details of the computer. Again, it includes the operating system, the utilities, the device drivers, and when it says language translators here, it's not spoken language. This would be computer language translators, not necessarily spoken language. Oh, it's going to be one of these types of days, okay? I can do this. I don't need the clicker. All right, so with operating systems. And yes, for your extra credit today, it is not a quiz today. It is one question about what is an operating system. Here's the answer to your question. It's a collection of programs that handle technical tasks. It manages the computer's resources, such as storage space, memory that is being used, central processing unit percentage that's being used by every application, printers, devices, input and output devices. It manages all those resources. It gives you a user interface. We talked about that as well with applications. It gives us a user interface, and it gives us the ability to run applications. There are several different examples, but I'm going to bore you tremendously with a nice video. Okay, it is an interesting video. So it's also called the software environment. So if those technical people that you talk with ask what software environment or what platform you're running, it's the operating system. All right, here we go. I promised 2 very cheesy videos. I'm actually going to can the music on this one. I'm going to can the music on this one. And so here we go, everybody. So 1978, you'll notice that there was no graphical user interface. It was all command line. It was all command line stuff. So we had operating systems like Commodore back then. We had Apple back then, Apple Disk Operating System. And as we go on in the 1980s, you'll notice not much has changed. But in the 80s, in the early 80s, early mid-80s, something tremendous happens. And we're going to wait for it. So time continues to go on through the early 80s. I've shown this video a billion times, it's okay. So 82 comes along, still a command line interface. But you see disk operating system up there. Believe it or not, disk operating system still exists today on each and every one of your computers. It's called the command prompt. Yes, the command prompt. And yes, several of the commands in the early 1980s still exist today with Windows machines. Here we go, 84. So Mac comes out with System 1.0, graphical user interface. Yes, that was over 40 years ago, everybody. So of course, Microsoft still had disk operating system until, I know you're like, Microsoft's like way behind. I know, right? There it is. Late 1985, Windows 1 comes out. What's the difference between Mac and Windows? What's the one glaring difference? One's in what?
Black and white.
Right, one's in black and white, and the other one is in color. So time continues on. Now we're hitting the later 1980s. Mac's still doing its thing. Windows 2.0 is out. Time continues to move on. Now we're getting close to 1990. It's coming. 1990 will be here soon enough. We're still in 89. So Mac's operating system still hasn't, both of them still haven't really changed a whole lot if you think about it. They're still there. Then Windows 3.0 comes out in 90. And it's okay, if you weren't born during this time, this was a very exciting time as we finally got Windows 3.0. I was an avid 3.1 user for quite a while. My dad, why did you buy a computer? Because I'm going to use it for college. Never going to make any money with that thing. Okay, so there we go. So Mac starts coming out in color now. 1993. Only about 30-something years ago, right? So time continues on. Hey, there's Minesweeper up in the upper left corner. I knew we'd find it in Hearts and Solitaire. No? No. I'll get bored at work and start playing Minesweeper. I've done that. Okay, so get your work done and you're like, what am I gonna do? Oh, there's Minesweeper. Now I'm working real hard. All right, Windows 95 comes out in 1995, of course, and that's when that's the first time we see the start button, Windows people. That's the first time we see the start button is Windows 95. We still have it today, of course. It's in the middle of your taskbar at the bottom of your screen. Mac continues to look the way it does, like this for a little while, but then the tremendous change is going to come. It is coming. Windows CE was for portable devices, like PDA type devices. NT was for networking. I'll talk about that in this chapter as well. So Windows 98 is out, continues on. Now we're coming to the turn of the century. Turn of the century, am I really saying that out loud? All right, Mac OS 9 is out now, turn of the century. Windows 98 Special Edition is there. Windows Millennium Edition comes out in 2000. I'll be honest, I never used that one. I think I skipped that one. I had 95, 98, held on. There we go. So now Mac OS starts really changing in the early 2000s. The XP, yes, XP was 23 years ago. That's scary stuff. XP is still on some machines, believe it or not. It's still being used today, 23 years later. Some scary stuff. Anytime you see an SP, that means service pack, that means like 40,000 new device drivers with that. But you'll notice that Windows kind of takes a holding pattern for a while, and Mac OS just starts taking off as far as graphics, as far as capabilities. It's just going to start taking off here. But you'll notice all the icons in Mac are still bottom middle, just like they are now with Windows. It's bottom middle. Oh, this only goes to 2015, everybody, so I will take it over from there after 2015. So time continues on. Windows XP is still there in 2006. So it's now been there for several years. And then one of the worst operating systems of all time, Windows Vista, comes out in 2007. Lord only knows why I used that. They really messed up Office during that time, everybody. I was teaching this class during that time too with Windows Vista. There was no more menus in Office. It was the Office button that you had to click. Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible during that time. So time continues to move on. Now we're getting into 2009. You notice we start getting iPhones. iPad's going to show up at some point. Windows 7, 2009, I was a really happy camper. Like Windows 7, thank goodness. iPad finally comes out. Time continues on. And then coming up is the worst operating system of all time. All right, at least in my opinion, it's coming. It's coming in the upper left corner. It's going to change. From Windows 7 to you know which Windows version comes after that. It's coming. It's coming. Very scary moment in my computing history coming up. Try not to relive that too. There it is, Windows 8, everybody. Oh, so many students were mad at me for that one. Okay. Of course, I had to beg for forgiveness later. Windows 8.1 came out, which finally brought back the start button. They took it away in Windows 8 and put it back in 8.1. And I'm like, please, let there be another operating system after this. I mean, if you want to get technical, 8.1 is technically 9, but because they jumped from 8.1 straight to 10. And then my class rejoiced. Okay, so that ends at 2015. I'm just going to can that. All right, very good. Okay, so if you're just joining us today, we have 2 cheesy videos, and my clicker, for some reason, has decided to take a break. So, yeah, it really has decided to take a break today, huh? Okay, all right. So as I said before, there are many functions with an operating system. It coordinates memory, I said that before. It coordinates processing, or the central processing unit. It coordinates how much storage you have available. So that means secondary storage, not memory. It's different from memory. And it also helps coordinate the printers and the monitors that you have connected to the computer. It also allows us to monitor system performance, which I'll show you that in just a minute. It also allows us to schedule tasks, like backups, for example, or all of you have phones, updates. It allows you to schedule updates as well. It also allows for security to be provided. And I hope you know what that means, because most of us need something to get into our devices, whether it's a number, whether it's a phrase, whether it's biometrics. Yes, my fingerprint people. No, I did not enable that on any of my devices, because if something happens to me, my wife is not supposed to like take my hand and go, come on, you can push the, you know what I mean? So yeah, I told her, please don't do that to your devices either. So we know each other's passwords and stuff. So anyway, it also gives us the ability to start up the computer. Because again, without an operating system, your device is just like some fancy coaster or like something that has nothing on it. So you have to have the ability to start the computer up. I know I've said this a billion times, it gives us a user interface. And it also allows us to multitask. That is one of your quiz answers for today. If you don't know what multitasking is, am I really going to explain this? It gives us the ability to go between applications, like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. We can do multiple things at one time. multiple tasks at one time. And keep in mind that there are foreground applications and background applications that are always running when you're using your devices. So any applications that you've opened and are actively using, those are your foreground applications. The background applications are anything that's running at startup, that's just sitting there waiting to be opened, or it's any one of the background processes that happen within the operating system. So you've got both foreground and background applications. All right, so some of this should be familiar to you. I'm just gonna go over it anyway. So there are two different ways you can boot a device. It's either gonna be completely shut off and you're gonna turn the power button to turn it on. Bless you.
Thank you.
We call that a cold boot. Yes, I'm the guy that turns off his computer at night and then doesn't turn it on again until I need to use it again, so I do a cold boot and turn the computer on. Some of you love to always have your device in a state of, like it's on, I just gotta move the mouse, like these. But these, that's a bad example, because when you move the mouse, you're not doing a warm boot. If we're restarting our device for updates, like your phones, for example, that's a warm boot. That means it's restarting the device, it's already on, we call that a warm boot. So cold versus warm, there's no hot. Anyhow, many different features in common with application software. I hope you know what an icon looks like. I really do. I hope you know what a pointer is. On our phones and tablets, it's this thing. This is our pointer on our phones and tablets, right? So we got to be able to navigate that pointer around. Mice, you all use mice. Trackpads. There's all kinds of devices we can move the mouse around with. We'll get into those devices in chapter 6. Windows. Even on your phones and tablets, when you open an application, it opens up in a window. We have to close them. If our devices are starting to slow down, we have to close all those windows. Menus. We have menus also. We also have tabs, just like we do in Microsoft Office. We have tabs. We have dialog boxes, which you've seen in Microsoft Office already. We have the same thing in the operating systems. Like, are you sure you want to delete this file, yes or no? And I'm like, yes, delete it. We also have help. Yes, there's help. So if you don't feel like, of course, most of you are like, forget it, I'm going to Google to get that answer. You know, that's what I do. I don't use the built-in help in the operating system. I go to Google and I type in my operating system and the question. Poof, I get the answer. I love it when students used to ask me all those questions. I'd be bombarded like 50 emails a day, like all these different questions. I'm like, we have a search engine. That's where I get all my stuff from. Then they stopped asking the questions. So, I mean, all I do is copy and paste the question into a search engine. I'm like, here's your answer. Gesture controls. So with gesture controls, again, like using our hands, double clicking, single clicking, right clicking, using our, like with laptops, right? The trackpad, using our finger to move around the mouse, okay? So those are gesture controls. And files and folders, yes, every operating system has files and folders. Even your phones, even your tablets, there's always files and folders all throughout every operating system, whether we like it or not. All right, so 3 categories of operating systems. I've always been meaning to like swap this, to have standalone go first. But I'll start with real time. So I'll start from left to right today. For the first time in years on this slide, I'm going to start from left to right. So all of our phones, our tablets, our smartwatches, those devices that need constant updating, we call those real-time operating systems. So our cable boxes need updates, satellite tuner boxes need updates, video game systems need updates. Those, yes, even on our phones, those need updates too, right? That's real, those are real-time operating systems. Network operating systems. So think about the computers in this room. They're technically all chained. I know you don't see the wires and stuff, but I mean, like, they're technically all chained and it's all plugged into the wall. So our IT department uses something called the network operating system. Yes, to where they have access to all the devices that network operating system is installed on. So even though these are all Windows 11 machines, it can be considered a network operating system because, yes, IT can remotely go into any one of these machines and make any update that they need to. So keep this in mind too. A network operating system is an operating system that's stored on some type of network server, which coordinates the communication between all the computers, especially like all of these in all of our labs. Standalone operating systems have been around for quite a while. Yes, I'm the person that manually updates Windows, where I actually have to have the CD. I have to put it into the. If you don't know what if you don't know what an optical drive is, we'll talk about those in chapter 7. Y'all got them on your computers. There it is. Y'all got optical drives on these computers. So yes, I follow the instructions. I create the media disk. I put it in. It asks me for the key for the operating system. I type it in. Boom, it installs the new operating system over the old one, and that's it. So we call those standalone operating systems because we can actually manually install it on a device. And believe me, I wanted to get rid of Windows 8 more than anybody in this class. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Anybody who's watching this video, I wanted to get rid of Windows 8 so bad, I got rid of it the day that I could, the first day that I could, and went to 10. We'll get to that in just a minute, because I'm gonna talk about that. So, I do hope you know what a mobile operating system is, because it says, no you don't, no. Okay, because they're installed where? Our phones and tablets, right? Okay, so they're mobile, right? So anyhow, Android, iOS, Windows Phone. Oh yes, and iOS is actually one of the quiz answers today too. When you see the question, you'll probably just sit there and giggle and you'll go, okay, that's iOS. Yes, these aren't trick questions that I ask in this class. But anyway, those, and I'm not going to talk about BlackBerry. Don't get me started about as a former BlackBerry user, I don't want to talk about that. Okay, so anyhow, moving on. Moving on. It was sort of ahead of its time, but when Android and stuff came out, I was like, and Apple came out, I'm like, forget this. So anyhow, Windows is still the most widely used. Mac, powerful and easy to use. Unix, originally designed for the web. It's usually network. So, in a few moments, I'm going to ask you a question about yourselves. And you're all going to go, you're either all going to say yes or you're all going to say no. But anyhow, moving on. Linux is non-proprietary. That means it's free. It means it's free of charge. For those companies that want to alter, or people, developers, software developers that want to alter a version of Linux, they can. They get the base version and then customize it. It's open source. It doesn't cost any money. That's why there are literally thousands and thousands of versions of Linux that are out there. I'm going to start with Windows. I'm going to talk about all 4 of these. Don't worry, the second cheesy video is coming up. Well, we're going to start with Windows. Okay, I've been teaching this class quite a while, even well before Windows 7 days, believe it or not. We were on XP when I was first teaching this class. So Windows 7 came out. Your textbook calls it the traditional user interface. It has a start button in the bottom left corner. You can search for stuff. There are icons on the desktop. So they call it a traditional user interface. Windows 8, I have to bring this up. So, I don't know. The first time I installed Windows 8 on something, my entire desktop was clear. There was no icons anywhere. I let out the biggest shriek I've let out in my entire lifetime. And I screamed out, where did all the files go? Of course, I did back it up, but I mean, like, it all vanished. So I saw this beautiful screen that you see up here on the board for Windows 8. There's a button that says desktop on it, or a tile that says desktop. I click on it, and it's blank. And that's when I just freaked out. There was like no way to search for something. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So I had to take another device and Google how to, or not Google, it was probably whatever it was at the time. I forget which search engine, but it was one of them. But I had to figure out how to do that. And I'm like, well, how do I get the start button back? So there was actually an application you could install to put the start button on your desktop. So I installed one of those, and I'm like, okay, this thing actually works. I'm like, okay, thank goodness. So, yes, I was one of the early adopters of Windows 8. Don't want to talk about it too much. When Windows 8.1 came out, the start button finally came out. But my students were like, I installed it too. Do you think it's as bad as? I'm like, oh, it's bad. It's bad. I really struggled that year teaching, or those couple of years teaching. But then 2015 came around, the summer of 2015, and I was teaching this class, and Microsoft made their announcement that Windows 10 was coming out, and it wouldn't cost you anything to move to it. So with Windows 10, you could actually install this on slower computers. So with Windows 10, it became less of a memory hog, less of a storage hog, and you could actually, didn't have that much consumption, so you could install it on slower machines. And that's what I did. I installed it on a couple of my slower machines, and it worked. And I was like, this is great. So yes, my poor wife has seen me go through all the emotions over the years with all these different operating systems. So anyhow, Windows 10 combined the tiles, as you can see in the start menu here, but the start button is also there in the bottom left corner. So it sort of combined the features of 7 and 8. Of course, my favorite part, believe it or not, was Cortana, when they put Cortana in, because I could just type stuff in, and it would just find it for me. And I'm like, this is great. I don't have to search anymore for stuff. I don't have to remember where I saved it. I can just go straight to the file. So now we're in the era of Windows 11, which you all have on these machines, where the taskbar is, well, in the center, at the bottom of the screen. It's in the center. Your start button and everything is in the center. Kind of like Macs. Macs, it's always been, those icons have always been down there in the center of the screen, always. Of course, now the fight in the house is, well, I need Windows 11. I don't need Windows 10 anymore. Can you get me Windows 11? You gotta have discounts, right? And I'm like, no. I gotta buy it just like everybody else. All right. So I'm not gonna read this whole thing, but you can see how many different versions of Mac there's been since 2012. Let me count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I count 13 different versions since 2012. So Mac is always updating their operating system. Seems like almost multiple times a year. Couple things I'm just going to point out on this that are important. So when I talked about Windows 10, Mac's equivalent to that was OS X Yosemite in 2014. They went to a minimal text-based design. Then in 2018, they came out with dark mode, which I immediately had to go find a Mac and figure out how to use that because I'm not a Mac person. But I actually was able to turn on dark mode, and I'm like, man, this is really sweet. I like this. So Mac came out with that many, many years ago. Another thing to note on here is Catalina, and that's October 2019. So I'm going to talk about this in Chapter 5 next week. So your computer's processor, most of the time it's either going to be these days 32 or 64-bit. If you buy a new machine with a new processor in it, it's a 64-bit processor, which means it processes 64 bits at a time, which is 8 bytes. We'll do all the math stuff next week. That's all going to happen next week, I promise. I promise I'm going to talk about all this stuff. But now you notice with Catalina, it no longer supports 32-bit applications, which means that if you have an older application that was made for 32-bit processors by Apple, you can no longer use those starting in 2019 with Catalina. One of my students goes, I actually saw that happen. I tried to run a 32-bit app and it wouldn't run. I'm like, that's too bad. Windows still has the capability to run 32-bit applications. And believe it or not, when I installed Microsoft Office recently, I chose the 32-bit version instead of the 64. And most people are like, well, why would you do that? It took up less hard drive space, took up less hard disk space, and it seems like it runs pretty darn good. So, I mean, it's Office, so I mean, it still runs pretty good. So, but most of the time when you're installing applications, they're 64-bit applications. But again, if you have a 32-bit processor, you can't run 64-bit applications. But if you have a 64-bit, you can run either 32 or 64 on a Windows machine. There, I told you I was going to give you the rest of that history. All right. Told you the question was coming soon, but my question to you is, have you ever used the Unix operating system? There's something bold in that bullet point there. There's a bold bullet point. What does it say?
Personal computers.
Personal computers. So believe it or not, I'm going to play a video here in a moment that's going to back this up. You have all used a Unix operating system. You're all like, well, which one? Well, what are the operating systems you have in front of you? What did I say these were on these machines? They're Windows what? 11, right? So, believe it or not, Windows is a Unix operating system. So is Mac. But it's used in network environments, servers on the web, mainframe computers, and personal computers. Linux, on the other hand, is the alternative to Windows. It doesn't cost any money. It is open source. Google Chrome OS is probably one of the most famous Linux operating systems that are out there, my Chromebook people. So yes, my Chromebook people, Google Chrome OS is a version of Linux. It is not a Windows or a Mac operating system. And it focuses on the speed of your internet connection, believe it or not. So the speed of your device is determined by the speed of your internet connection. Scary stuff, right? Well, I got something at the bottom of this slide. There are dates. What do you notice about the two dates? Just asking. There's a big difference in these two dates, right? One was like, good Lord. One was like 55 years ago, and the other one was a little bit newer, about 34 years ago. So it's time for our cheesy video that's going to talk about these. Yes, I'm going to, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to let them talk. I'm just going to play the video, and I'm going to talk. Because that's what I do. Some of these videos, you just don't need to hear it. Okay, so here it is. All right. I know this video by heart now, so I'll just go ahead and start talking. So, Unix, 1970, developed by Bell Laboratories in 1970. You will notice in just a moment the operating systems that he is going to put under 1970, and that includes Windows, and that includes Mac. So Windows and Mac. Because remember what I said earlier, do we have to pay any money for Linux? No, but do we have to pay money for Unix? Yes. So Unix is proprietary. So we do have to pay money for that. So when you go, well, I need a new Windows license. Well, we gotta buy it from somewhere, right? We gotta find some place to buy it and pay the money for it. So it is proprietary, believe it or not. So here he goes. He's gonna talk about Mac. He's gonna talk about Windows. Linux, on the other hand, I talked about this several times already. It is free. It is free to download. It is free to install. I'm going to talk about virtualization in this class, today's class, in just a few moments. I know I want to speed this up because I think he's behind me. Don't worry, everybody. I'm just going to speed this up just a little bit. I used to let him talk during this, but people told me I did it better. So anyhow, Linux is free. 1991. Some call it a derivative of Unix. It's not really a derivative of Unix. It's definitely different than Unix. If you've ever used the Linux operating system, if you haven't, you should give it a shot. It's free. It's different. It's a different looking operating system. So there are literally thousands of Linux versions out there. So today's extra credit, the first part of today's extra credit that's out there is I ask, what is an operating system? If you don't get that question right, I do not give you credit for it at all. And then you have to find 25 different operating systems. So you know what that means? Well, Nick, can I use Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10? Yes, you can. You can use a whole bunch of different versions. So here's what Linux looks like. So there are Linux versions out there. There's Ubuntu, there's Fedora, there's a bunch of different versions that are out there. But essentially, this looks like a desktop with a bunch of icons on it. So it does look a little bit different. I talked about Open Office last week. So on a Linux operating system like this, you would install, you notice you can get Firefox for it. But you can install OpenOffice on Linux operating systems. So there's my second cheesy video. All right, back to the action. So anyway, again, Chrome OS, that's another one of your quiz answers for today, just letting you know. But it's there. All right, and as you can see, like here's an example of the Google Chrome OS desktop icons, once again. You've seen this before, I hope. But here it is. All right, I said I was going to talk about virtualization. So it's a big word. It's a big word. All it means is it gives your computer the ability to support multiple operating systems at the same time. So we use something called virtualization software. On every one, do not open this on your computers, but on every single one of these computers, there's something called Oracle VirtualBox. It's a free program that allows you to install other operating systems on your device, and it allows you to use them. So, the physical machine, the machines that are in front of you, would be the host operating system. Oracle's VirtualBox program that is running another operating system, we call that the guest operating system. So there are other programs that are out there like Parallels on Mac, which allows you to run Windows programs, or Windows applications. There's also something called Hyper-V or hyper-virtualization, which Windows has had for the last several versions. For me, I do like running Oracle VirtualBox. I was actually able to install 10 different versions of Linux and use them and open them up with no problems at all. It's really, really cool. And you can actually save your work that you do in Linux in the virtual machines as well. So in a nutshell, all you're going to do to install this is you're going to go somewhere where you can get like a Linux, they call it a distribution, a Linux distribution. You download it, you open up VirtualBox, you install it. Yes, it walks you through the installation. You install it, it asks you how much of your hard drive or how much of your hard disk you want to dedicate to that operating system. So I usually pick like a low number of gigabytes. If I have like a terabyte hard drive, which is like 1,000 gigabytes plus, more than 1,000 gigabytes, I will allocate maybe 20 to it, 20 gigabytes to it. So you can install the Linux version. You can actually open it up and use it. Like you can actually use it. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So I tried to install a whole bunch of different versions and it worked. Like I had 10 different ones that I could pick from and I'm like, this is crazy. Then of course I had an old Windows 95 disk laying around and I'm like, no, it's not gonna let me install 95, right? It did, it walked me through it. It asked me where the file was. I pointed it to the disk and it started setting up. So yeah, you can do old versions of Windows on it too. I wonder if my 3.1 with the floppy disks would work. Yeah, we'll have to try that. We'll have to try that another time. You're like, Windows 3.1, really? Yeah, sure, why not? What decade are we in now? Okay. Anyway, let's get into utilities. So I said I was going to spend most of the class on operating systems. I did that. So let's move on to utilities. So Mac and Windows have many different utilities. And these utilities include troubleshooting and diagnostic programs, antivirus programs, backup programs, and something called a file compression program. So if you think about file compression programs, it's like we're taking a whole bunch of files and we're compressing them into a folder. That's the compression. Then we can also take it out of the folder and get all the files back, and that's the decompression. All right. So our task manager. It's called the activity monitor on the Mac. I'll show you that screen in just a minute. But here on your Windows machines, I'm just going to show you. I just always right-click the task. See, I just right-click the taskbar down here and Task Manager comes up. So I can bring up the Task Manager. Here it is. So it shows me how much of the central processing unit is being used, how much memory is being used. You're like, dang, that's a lot by Google Chrome. Yeah, Chrome's a memory hog, everybody, believe it or not. How much of the disk is actually being used? But for me, whenever I get a new computer, which just happened, I have to go to the startup programs, or the startup applications, which is, hold on, I'm going to find it. It's one of these. There it is, startup apps. All right, I like to show this because some people are like, how come it takes so long for my desktop to show up? It's probably because you've got a bunch of different startup programs that are running at startup. So my goal when I get a new computer is anything that says hi, like this one right here, I see if I can end that, like I see if I can disable that. Because, yeah, I don't need that running. And what if it's an application that you use only once in a while and you don't want it running all the time? You can disable it here in the startup apps area. And then if you want to go open that application later, you can go open it any time you want. So what I do is I minimize the number of applications that are starting when I turn the computer on so that it's faster. It's much faster loading to get to the desktop. I think my desktop comes up now after I put my password in. On my new one, it's less than 2 seconds or something like that. It's some insanely fast time. And I'm already in the desktop. I'm like, I paid $400 for this computer. I shouldn't be in the desktop in 2 seconds. So yes, I'm telling you, if you ever get a computer, check out the startup apps and disable. I'm telling you, disable whatever. Now, like some things I don't want to mess with, like the Intel graphics command set. I'm not going to mess. Some of the stuff I'm not going to mess with. But like if it's like Adobe Acrobat or something like that, and it's coming up every single time, you can disable that. Or if it's like McAfee, oh my God, don't get me started on McAfee. I uninstalled that sucker the minute I got the computer. I'm like, nope, I know it's free, but I don't want it. Yeah, Felix.
What's the shortcut to get to the task manager?
Oh, yeah, you just right click the bottom of, right down here. Just right click down at the bottom, somewhere in the gray area, and it just comes up Task Manager.
Okay.
Yeah. You can do that on your computers here too, I think. But anyhow, here's another thing too, another tip too. So if your computer is slow, and in the CPU column you see something like 90% or something, and it starts saying not responding, you should probably end the task. You should probably right click it and end the task, or click on it and end the task. If it's chewing up a lot of memory and you're just like, okay, this is ridiculous, I don't want to do this. So we will end the task. Okay, enough of that. Activity monitor. No, I'm not going to get into activity monitor, but there are the 2 steps. If you, Mac people, if you ever need to go to your activity monitor, obviously I don't have a Mac in front of me, so we're not going to do that. But here it is. It shows you how to quit processes in that screen right there. Moving on. Yes, file history. So file history allows you to make backups, and allows you to make backups of all the files in the libraries, contacts, favorites, and your desktop. As you can see, you're like, wait a minute, that's not from the textbook, that picture is like actually his. Yes, that picture is actually, no, the picture actually is mine. So that's my flash drive. So I was backing everything up to my flash drive, which you can do. You can go in there and select which drive you want to back up to, and it will back up your files. It will keep a history of your files, which is really nice. Mac has something called Time Machine. As you can see, Apple Menu, System Preferences, Time Machine. So yes, it allows you to see all of your different backups. You notice how in the window here that's here on the screen, you can see all your different backups using a timeline. So when you start running out of space, disk cleanup is definitely recommended to use. Identifies and eliminates non-essential files. That's another quiz answer for today. This is another quiz answer for today. Yes, this is actually these are actually screen captures from my computer. Now, some of you are going to say, well, Nick, I have so much storage space, I don't need to clean these files up. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to. But sometimes when we haven't done this cleanup in like a year or 2, the files start racking up. And then when it says you can get like 5, 10 gigabytes back in free space, okay, I'll take 10 gigabytes of free space. I don't know about you, but I would definitely take that. Anyhow, you can see this one here that I ran, only 8 megabytes was coming back, so that's not much. Well, when you start getting into the gigabytes free up, that's a game changer for your computer. Mac has something called Disk Utility, and the thing that scares me the most about this screen in the upper right corner in that picture that I took, there's a button that says erase, like erase the whole hard drive. Yeah. I'll never forget that. Business lab, a few years back on the main campus, they got their new Macs, and I was teaching this class, and right after I got done with this class, I asked the class, I'm like, I wonder if that erase button works. So I went to one of the Macs in the lab, and I got to this screen, and you notice how here it's grayed out? It was illuminated. And I'm like, I'm gonna click it. Then it gave me the dialog box that said, are you sure you want to erase, which one is it, Macintosh HD? And it said yes or no. At that point, I freaked out. And I said, no. Called the help desk. I'm like, I need somebody up here. I'm like, I need that disabled. Because if I can do it, any student can come over here and just go, boom. Hard drive gone. So yes, I got to teach IT a few things over the years as well. The disk defragmenter is another utility. So chapter 7, I'm going to talk about, I call it the traditional hard disk. As you can see on the left side of this slide, you see the traditional hard disk, which has a bunch of concentric circles that go around the hard disk's platter, the spinning platters. So on each one of, we call them tracks. That's what these concentric circles are. They're called tracks. Inside of every track is a sector. So the higher your hard disk's capacity, the more bytes that are packed, density, I think that might be another answer for today. The more dense the bytes become in each sector of the hard disk. However, now a lot of us are using solid state drives. But let me go back to the traditional hard disk really quick with defragmentation. So when you save a file on your computer, all of the bytes are together. They're all together. Now, let's say you don't use that, you don't go back to that document for like months. So over those months, the bytes that were all nicely packed together start becoming fragmented all over the hard disk. So you run the disk defragmenter to take all those bytes and put them all back together. When a file becomes fragmented, it takes longer for the file to open because it has to go find those bytes all over the hard disk. But when they're together, you double-click the file, boom, it opens. Now on these computers, we have solid state drives. My question to you is, do we have to defragment solid state drives? Another question, do solid state drives have the tracks and the sectors? The answer is no. So then do we have to defragment it? Correct, I heard no, that is correct. Because think about it, electricity moves fast. On solid state drives, it's a circuit board. It's not spinning platters. You're like, ooh, another reason I need a solid state drive. Yes, that is correct. That's another reason you need a solid state drive. Some people like to use utility suites, like Norton, for example, where, if you notice on the right side of this slide, it has all the things that I just talked about. It has Windows startup, programs that start up. It has defragmentation, smart defrag. However, as I tell people, you don't need one of these if you know how to use the utilities that come with your operating system. If you know how to use those, you don't necessarily have to buy one. In almost 4 decades of computing, how many of these have I purchased? Take a wild guess.
0.
0! Thank you. Because I use the utilities with the operating system. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's why in this class, I'm giving you awareness as to what those utilities are. Some people just go buy it. They're like, forget what he showed me. I'm gonna go buy it. All right. Now device drivers. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. So I talked about this in chapter 1. When you plug a device into your computer, you're expecting it to work. If it does not work, you need to ask yourself, without taking it back to sending it back to wherever you got it from, if I install a device driver, will it work? Because every operating system has thousands and thousands and thousands of these little tiny programs called device drivers. But there is a possibility that you buy something that's brand new that doesn't have a device driver on the computer. So my advice to anybody is, when that happens, you leave your device plugged in, you find out what your manufacturer of the device that you're plugging into the computer is. If you know what operating system you have, you know how to Google things, I hope. So you would just Google the manufacturer's name, model if you have the model of whatever you're plugging in, and your operating system, and you should get hits that come up with device drivers. Now, of course, when you're looking at the search engine hits, as I talked about in chapter 2, you need to evaluate where it's coming from. So for me, I don't just go to some random website. If it's the actual manufacturer's website, like you see the link, you go there for the device driver. You don't try to go to some random weird website that could give you a virus or something. You stick with the manufacturer's website. But anyway, here it is. Oh, and another answer for today's quiz. I just keep giving them to you. Windows Update. So sometimes you have to run Windows Update to get a whole bunch of new device drivers as well. I like that my operating system at home tells me when I need to update it. And then I'm like, okay, I click the button and it updates. No big deal. But yes, so again, one more time. It's when you're plugging something into your computer and it doesn't work, that's when you need to tell yourself, I need to go get that device driver. We don't just automatically send it back to the manufacturer. That's a no. Right. Yes, this is an actual screen where I added the President's Office color printer to my computer. Yes, you see it right here. Okay, moving on. Oh, that's right, we're at the end. All right, so I'm sure that dollar amount has changed at the bottom for 2024, but our career this time is the Computer Support Specialist, which provides technical support to customers and other users. They resolve common networking problems and the troubleshooting programs to diagnose problems. So most of these positions now look for a bachelor's degree and also really, really good communication skills. And yes, median salaries as of 23 was $71,530. Okay. And our look to the future for this chapter, self-maintaining, updating, repairing servers. So when a server goes down, another server's there, picks it back up. So downtime is minimal these days. So when something goes down, I don't know if that's ever happened to you, something goes down and then all of a sudden it's back up again. You're like, well, that was weird. Sometimes the server goes down, and it comes right back up because we have things like self-maintaining servers, which saves a lot of time on the part of humans because, well, if the server's doing all the maintaining, I don't need to be there. All right, I'm sure that they have to check up. The network administrators have to check on those things, all right? We'll do network administration in chapter 8. All right. Hey, people at home. I know it was a short one. I'm going to give you your last 20 minutes back in your day. I have something to do here with the class. You should have been here. All right, people at home. Again, exam, if you missed the announcements earlier, exam 1 is available on Canvas, chapters 1 through 4, unlimited time, 50 questions, multiple choice. People at home, we're going to catch you on Thursday for our 4th Word chapter. And yes, it's going to be the one where you have to download multiple files. Just be ready for that on Thursday.